Did Michael Cohen betray you, Mr. President? Did Michael Cohen betray you? Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is going to say to prosecutors? Are you worried about what is on the other tapes, Mr. President? Donald Trump's answer to each of those questions today was, thank you. When he was being bombarded by questions about the tape of his conversation with Michael Cohen as reporters were being ushered out of the president's Oval Office meeting with the president of the European Commission. And in classic Trump White House style, the CNN reporter who yelled those questions to the president was banned from the president's next appearance in the Rose Garden, where another CNN reporter was allowed to cover that event for the network. But it didn't matter because the president immediately turned and left before reporters could even attempt to shout their questions across the grass. If you are one of those people who thinks that Donald Trump does not have a good answer to any one of those questions that were yelled at him today, you are not alone. You are not alone tonight if you believe Stormy Daniels' story about her having sex with Donald Trump a few months after Donald Trump's third wife gave birth to his fifth child. And you are not alone if you believe former Playboy model Karen McDougal is telling the truth when she says she had a year-long sexual affair with Donald Trump around the same time. If you believe Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, you are part of an overwhelming majority of the American people. A CNN poll shows that 63% of Americans believe the women, and only 21% believe that Donald Trump did not have sex with those women. And that poll was taken before this week. And now those 21% who believe Donald Trump might be a smaller number tonight after 24 hours of exposure to the audio recording of Donald Trump discussing how to create a company specifically to make payments to Karen McDougal, to buy her silence and prevent her from ever telling her story of her year of dating the married Donald Trump. Now, we don't know if First Lady Melania Trump was in the 21% who believed Donald Trump, and we don't know if her mind was changed by hearing her husband talking to Michael Cohen on an audio recording that made its worldwide debut last night on what is reportedly Melania Trump's favorite cable news network. Under the headline, Trump Rages Against Reality, the New York Times reported Monday night on the first couple's recent trip overseas, Melania Trump's television aboard Air Force One was tuned to CNN. President Trump was not pleased. He raged at his staff for violating a rule that the White House entourage should begin each trip tuned to Fox. That same New York Times report says the White House is ordering additional television equipment so that Mr. and Mrs. Trump can watch the TV shows of their choice while traveling. The new equipment is, quote, to make sure the president and first lady could both watch TV in their separate hotel rooms when they travel. Now, separate hotel rooms might be an indicator of whether Melania Trump believes that Donald Trump had sexual adventures with at least two other women shortly after Melania Trump gave birth. But we have no idea what the First Lady of the United States actually thinks about the President of the United States being caught on tape discussing a payoff to one of those women, because the third Mrs. Trump has said absolutely nothing about her husband today. She has not rushed to his defense. She has not denied creating tension for the president and his staff on Air Force One by refusing to watch Fox News. No one who knows Donald Trump best is defending Donald Trump tonight about what we heard on Michael Cohen's recording. And that is always a very important thing to watch for when a politician is in sex scandal trouble. Who's standing up and saying, I know Donald Trump and he would never do that? Donald Trump's three adult children by the first Mrs. Trump, who spring to his defense in every situation, are absolutely silent in the middle of Michael Cohen's tape crisis. Not one of those adult children have stepped forward and said, I know my father better than anyone, including his third wife, and I can tell you my father would never violate his marital vows. They can't say that, of course, because their father publicly broke up with their mother while having a very public affair with the woman who was to become the second Mrs. Trump. And so, with a public record like that, it's hard to believe anyone would accept Donald Trump's denials of any extramarital sexual affairs. And it would seem among the people least likely to believe Donald Trump's denials are the three Mrs. Trumps who know him so well. And that's the problem at the base of the Michael Cohen tape story. Most people believe that Donald Trump is guilty of having the sexual affairs that he has been caught plotting to pay big money to cover up. No one in the Trump family has ever said that they would take a bullet for Donald Trump. The only person who has said that is Michael Cohen, and now Michael Cohen has decided to unload his ammunition on Donald Trump. Michael Cohen decided to release that audio last night through his lawyer, Lanny Davis, and today Lanny Davis said there's more.
There are more tapes of Donald Trump?
There are certainly more tapes that Mr. Cohen has discussed that he normally did in order to take notes. He used his telephone. Beyond that, I'm not going to comment.
And after that, this morning, the President of the United States tweeted, "What kind of a lawyer would tape a client?" To which the only reasonable reply is, what kind of an idiot would have a lawyer who would tape a client?
We've got the best people.
I know the best people.
We're going to use our best people. The best people.
The best people. I know guys that are so good.
Here again are Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, the best people, discussing creating a company in order to buy Karen McDougal's silence.
I need to open up a company for the transfer of all of that info regarding our friend David, so that I'm going to do that right away. I've actually come up and I've spoken to Alan Weisselberg about how to set the whole thing up with funding. Yes. And it's all the stuff, because you never know where that company, you never know where he's going to be. Correct. So I'm all over that. And I spoke to Alan about it when it comes time for the financing, which will be.
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the kid.
No. I got no. Hey, Don, how are you?
No. This morning, the Wall Street Journal reported, quote, Michael Cohen, then a top attorney at the Trump Organization, created Resolution Consultants, LLC on September 30th, 2016, to purchase the rights to Karen McDougal's story, which had been bought by the publisher of the National Enquirer a month earlier, a person said. Mr. Cohen's plan to use that company to buy the rights to Ms. McDougal's story hasn't previously been reported. Mr. Cohen referred to his plan to create a company to buy her story in a September 2016 conversation with Mr. Trump that he secretly recorded and that was aired Tuesday by CNN. Leading off our discussion now, Jill Wine-Banks, former Assistant Watergate Special Prosecutor. Tim O'Brien is with us. He's the executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and the author of Trump Nation, The Art of Being the Donald. Also with us, Emily Jane Fox, senior reporter for Vanity Fair and the author of Born Trump. All three are MSNBC contributors. And Emily, you have good Michael Cohen sources, including Michael Cohen himself. So have you had chats with Michael Cohen today about this?
I've talked to people generally in Cohen world over the past couple of days.
Okay, that's the way we will set the table. Why is Michael Cohen doing this?
I think that there has been a tremendous amount of frustration since the recording was reported about on Friday, because he felt, and people around him felt, like the narrative that was put out by Rudy Giuliani was incorrect. And he felt like he was a sitting duck who was having a story written around him that was not true, and he was being kicked again for what he felt like was the millionth time by the president and by people around the president. He has this belief that there is a strategy in existence by the president, by people close to the president, including Giuliani, including Jared Kushner, including Don Jr., and that strategy is to discredit and to distance themselves from Michael Cohen. So this was just the tip of the iceberg, where they felt like having this recording out there was just another attempt to discredit Michael Cohen, especially because Giuliani had said on the record that this tape was completely exculpatory for the president, that this showed that the president was completely innocent, that he didn't know about the payments to AMI, and Michael Cohen felt differently. And so after 3 days of endless news coverage about that tape, about that narrative that Giuliani had put out, he was tired of it. And I think he wanted to set the record straight by putting out the recording. Now, does this recording completely exonerate either of them? No. Does it raise more questions to have this question? Yes. But I think that there was sort of a little bit of a sigh of relief today in Cohen world, because it felt like the narrative had changed, and perhaps slightly more in Cohen's favor.
What did Michael Cohen think of the president's tweet this morning saying what kind of a lawyer would tape a client?
I think the general thought process when something like that is said at this point is, if you want to kick me, I will kick you back, and I will kick you 10 times harder.
One of the amusements of this particular round is watching how carefully Emily has to protect her sources while telling us what she can. Jill Wine-Banks, you listened to what Emily just told us about what we believe is going through Michael Cohen's mind. Imagine yourself as Michael Cohen's criminal defense lawyer in this FBI investigation that he's in the middle of right now, where no charges have yet been brought. And he has also hired Lanny Davis as a kind of public speaker for the defense. And Michael Cohen presents to you basically these feelings that Emily's just revealed for us. What would you say to him as his criminal defense lawyer?
As his defense lawyer, I would say cooperate completely. It is well believed that he knows a lot, not just about the payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, but other wrongdoing by the president. And he could be the person who can explain exactly what the words on that tape are. Did the president say, pay with cash? Or did he say, don't pay with cash? That's the debate that's going on now. And while it doesn't matter in terms of whether it violates campaign finance laws, it does matter in terms of how it is perceived. And just like John Dean was the person who could say what the words on the tapes in the Oval Office meant and exactly what they were saying, so too could Cohen, because he was a participant. He taped the conversation. So it's very important that he be an open and honest witness, and that he behave in the same way that John Dean did, so that we can learn what the truth is. And we can't rely on transcripts any more than we could when President Nixon tried to use Stennis to provide transcripts of the Oval Office tapes.
Yeah, President Nixon tried to use a senator involved in the investigation to just say, this is what were on the tapes. Just, Emily, quickly, what we just heard from Jill, is that the legal advice, as far as you know, that Michael Cohen is getting, to just cooperate?
I think the general advice for everyone close to him is to look out for yourself. And Michael Cohen said in an interview on the record with ABC, my loyalty is to my country and to my family. And I think that there's no one in his orbit who is not saying that. But I will say that people familiar with his thinking over the weekend have told me that you know, obviously he's been leaning more in that direction. But as Jill just made the point, it's not what is on the recording, but it is the backstory. And Michael Cohen is able to provide that backstory. And as it was relayed to me, that backstory could be very valuable.
And Tim, Washington Post reporting, as Rachel just announced at the beginning of the hour, 100 tapes. That's how many tapes they actually now have of Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, or Donald Trump's businesses being discussed, issues involving Donald Trump being discussed on 100 Michael Cohen tapes.
You know, I would go back to the tweet you referenced in the top of the hour when Trump tweeted what kind of a lawyer tapes his client, and I would answer that a little differently than you. I would say the kind of a lawyer who tapes his client is a lawyer who has a client who's telling him that he's taping everyone else. And that's been Trump's story forever. When you, as a reporter, would go into Trump's office, he would say, you don't mind if I turn on my tape recording system, do you? And he would reach beneath his desk and pretend to press a button. He told Jim Comey that
you say pretend to press a button.
Well, I know, in fact, he was pretending, because we deposed him later about this. But, you know, he threatened James...
Instead of having a recording device in plain view,
no, it was the
he
secret
would do this
button.
James Bond thing.
It was very
like,
Bond-like,
secret...
Ernst Blofeld.
Just record you. Why not just actually record you?
But I think, you know, he would have had to pay to get a system put in. That's money he didn't want to spend. But when we litigated under deposition in December of 2007, my attorney said to him, Mr. Trump, you've repeatedly said that you've had a recording system in your office and that you recorded Mr. O'Brien and other reporters. One, why did you do that? And then two, does it exist? And he immediately went to, no, it doesn't exist, because he knew we would be able to get it during discovery. But then he said, the reason I tell them I do it, though, is I need to scare them, because they're dishonorable people. I don't trust reporters. They're bad people. And I knew if I said I was recording them, they'd be on their best behavior. And I think that's that's the attitude he took to most of the people who worked for him. And he certainly, I think, through most of the relation with Michael Cohen, treated him in a demeaning way. So at some level, of course, Michael Cohen was thinking all the time about insurance policies, and tape recording this guy was one of them.
What other incentives, Emily, would Michael Cohen have for taping his client? You're suggesting, Tim, and the insurance policy would be against some possible criminal prosecution if the Trump business crossed a line somewhere, and Michael Cohen would be able to protect his side of what he said.
Or even if Trump was going to fire him, and he just wanted or threatened to fire him, or whatever came up in the course of their interactions, it was something that gave him a line of defense.
Emily, what do you think the incentives are for Michael Cohen to?
That is a big incentive. I would say there's, Lanny Davis had said in interviews and in conversations I've had with him that this is the way that Michael Cohen takes contemporaneous notes. He doesn't like to take notes in a notepad or a notebook. And so that these recordings were a way for him to document conversations that were important that he would need to reference down the line.
And Jill, just as a lawyer, there's a lot of reasons why a lot of people in a lot of occupations might want to have a tape backup, and there are many, many reasons why a lawyer would not want to have a tape backup.
There are, but I think in this case, the reason would be that he was worried that at some point he would be the fall guy for the president, that he was doing a lot of things that were possibly skirting the line or clearly illegal, and that rather than allowing the president at a later point to say, oh, he did that on his own, I had nothing to do with it, he wanted to have the proof that he was carrying out Trump's orders, and that would protect him in that way.
A final note to Emily, we are always trying to impose a logic on Trump world, Cohen world. Is it possible that part of the whole Michael Cohen taping is just really bad thinking, really messy idea, and not really thinking through why he's taping?
Anything is possible, right? I think there are certain conversations like this conversation that it seems to me, and this is just me talking to you, that there is a reason why this conversation in particular was recorded. It does not seem like an accident that these specific things were brought up in a conversation. It was a recording that was done in person. It seems like a fairly standard meeting between boss and employee. That this was brought up and recorded is an interesting thing to note. I don't think that these recordings were necessarily made accidentally.
We're going to have to leave it there for this break. Jill Wine-Banks, Emily Jane Fox, Tim O'Brien, thank you all for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.